our team. So we want to encourage people from the community to apply for these positions once the application period is open. We are selecting three board members and one for the AILAC, at-large advisory committee representing the African region. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I think there are C-level sessions dedicated to ICANN, one on the key, signing key, one on the updates on IANA, so there's still more to it. So thanks for everyone, and I think we are at the end of this session. Yeah, okay, hand over to.
So, thank you, Pierre, Yaovi, and Bob. We have 10 minutes before the presentation of Garrett. So I'll invite you to have questions on to Moinoa regarding the FIRE program. As you know, AFRINIC has a FIRE program, the Fund for Internet Research and Education. So he has given an update on all the grants and awards. So if you have more questions, and regarding our discussion list, we have announced at AFRINIC and AFRIACAN at AFRINIC. So all communication on ICANN, AFRINIC, and other stakeholders are circulated on those mailing lists. So I'll invite you to subscribe to the mailing list. It's under AFRINIC website, under community and discussion list. So questions for Manoir or Stephen during his Bright Fellowship program at IETF? If you don't have one question, yes?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, hello, my name is Jacob, and I'm an AFRINIC fellow, 25 fellow. My question goes to Mr. Kivuva concerning the FIRE program and the projects that you select for. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes. So concerning the FIRE program, I want to know what factors do you consider in selecting the project? Okay, what are you looking out for in the application process, in the initiatives that people bring on board? How do you select? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob, for that question. We usually put the criteria on the website, on the fireafrica.org website. So when you are applying, you'll see the criteria. But we usually have categories like you have seen: community development, technical innovation, access provision. So your project has to fall within those categories. And we have clearly defined the meaning of those categories on the website. And also those projects have to be executed in Africa. When you are applying, your project has to be from an African company, and the projects have to be helping communities within the continent. Thank you.
I would just like to add one comment, Manuel. So if you have project, but you are not sure about your project, you want to give it to the FIRE program, but there are things that are missing, you can, beforehand submitting your project, you can liaise with Manuel to have more information on how to assist you, and we shall guide you. So yes, another question, Mark, and then Khaled.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Elkins. Mwendwa, I was lucky to sneak into one of your workshops at a previous AFRINIC meeting, and they are currently closed to everyone except for FIRE award winners. I actually found the information that was being passed over extremely useful for anyone who wants to have an entrepreneurial mind and wants more knowledge on doing that. And as many ISPs who are effectively the customers of AFRINIC are looking at making small businesses bigger, the value of those courses, I believe, should be open somewhat more than they are. And I would love you to consider making them a little less closed if possible.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That's a very good observation, and at AFRINIC, actually, it's something we have considered. You can remember, like in the meetings in Gaborone, Botswana, the last AIS, the FIRE workshops were open. And there is a reason why we close them like this time. This is a new cohort of grantees. They are meeting for the first time. So we are taking them through how they should manage those specific projects, at what time they should report, the conditions you have been given by the donors, and they are sharing their experiences, the challenges they are facing with their projects. So we want it, and it's like they're coming together like sort of an alumni and bonding and helping each other. So that's the reason actually why we have closed like for this time, but it is on a case by case basis. But we have taken those comments. Probably we'll be able to talk with the executive and try to see the best way around it. And it's very important actually we open and help more members of the community, and we videotape these sessions and we put them on the AFRINIC YouTube channel, but we will actually work on that. Thank you.
Khaled?
Hi, good morning again. Khaled Foba. I will speak on my personal capacity. I would like to echo what Stephen said about the ITF. And I remember when I was in the board of ISOC back in 2009, I was trying to do my best to bring ITF meetings to the African region. The answer that I had from the ITF leadership was that we don't have enough participation from this region. So my point is that I encourage everyone to not only be participant, but also encourage the others, students, professors, professionals, developers, technical people to participate in the ITF. And the good thing with the ITF participation is that it's not only going to the ITF meeting or having a fellowship to go there. It's an open participation through mailing list. So I encourage everyone to be active in the mailing list and working groups before even think about applying for the fellowship, because I mean, it's not only traveling to an ITF meeting, it's also be impactful when it comes to creating draft or RFCs that will allow the African community to shine up. So I encourage everyone to go that path. It's an obvious one for us to be impactful on the internet. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank you, Khaled. And I would also like to say the sessions actually are always streamed, so people can even participate remotely if they can't travel. And after the sessions, those videos are available on the ITF YouTube channel. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a last question before Garrett gave his update. So, Tijani?
Thank you very much. Tijani speaking. I am from the end users community in ICANN. My remark is not about fire, it's more about the ICANN African strategy. As you know, ICANN is about names and numbers. This is its mission. And there is a lot of people arguing that it is not in the merit of ICANN to make capacity building, promotion of the DNS market in those regions like Africa. People are saying that ICANN should not spend their money for those activities. And before, until now, until last October, if you want, the board was deciding on anything. Now, the board is not free to decide on anything, since with the transition, with the new accountability process, the community can veto the budget. So what I want to stress here is that what Pierre and his team are doing now is wonderful. But I am afraid that in the future, funding those activities will not be as easy as it is now. I really encourage the community to participate. It is very important, the participation of the community, because it will be the community, the ICANN community, who will veto the budget if they want to do so. So if we participate more in the work of our community, we may influence the decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tijani. So I'm going to call Garrett Tyson to give an update on the African Internet Measurement Observatory. As you know, at AFRINIC, we have a partnership with RIPE and ISOC, and we distribute I-class probes and anchors. So if you need more information on that, I'll let you lead with Amrish and have more information. Garrett?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I've just been handed a lunch leaflet, so I'm kind of aware that I'm the guy standing between you and lunch, so I'll try and make this as short and sweet as possible. Thank you very much. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Gareth, and I work at the University of London, obviously based in London. But this is not a work I'm just presenting on my own. This actually, let's see if I can do this. There we go. This is actually a project that we're trying to bootstrap with a number of participants, including AFRINIC themselves. So I have to offer a huge amount of thanks and a huge amount of credit to all these logos down here. There we go. You can see the animation again. Fantastic. But this one at the bottom is my logo, Queen Mary. So what's the premise behind this project called AMO, which we're trying to bootstrap? So the idea is that the internet is evolving fast. This is something that I've observed in my own research. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it as well. But evolving fast can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because it really makes understanding the status quo difficult. And if we can't understand the status quo, it makes it difficult to predict as well into the future. And often these predictions are very important because if you, for example, want to make a large capital expenditure in a deployment, or if you want to, say, feed insight into the IETF that was just being spoken about, you can only really do that if you understand the setups of the internet around you and what it's going to be looking like in the next 2, 3, 5, or even 10 years' time. So if you think about the typical decision-making process that we all go through, or at least I go through, it usually follows a few steps. So the first one is having some type of bright idea, or at least something that we think is a bright idea. The next thing we do is we go along and we devise some experiment to collect data about that bright idea. And of course, we evaluate that evidence and then we make a decision off the back of it. Now, at least in my own experience, 90% of the time, that decision means I had a crap idea, let's start again. But 10% of the time, it also means actually that was quite a cool idea, let's try and collect some more evidence and explore it further. And these two middle steps are the things we're focusing on in this project. We're wanting to devise technologies and techniques to make your lives easier when doing these first two middle steps. So a simple example of something you might want to do when you're making decisions is deciding where you put your infrastructure. So imagine you're a web operator. I mean, some of you might be web operators, and you're wanting to expand your infrastructure around Africa. You need to decide where and how you expand that infrastructure. Now, to answer that question, you probably need to answer a number of other sub-questions. So you might say things like, well, where are my subscribers? Who accesses my service? You might say, well, where are the possible data center hosts I can put my servers? How much do each of them cost? And what are the network characteristics that link all my subscribers to those points? And of course, if it's an advanced website, you might want to start digging into your design to understand the different components and how those might interplay with the network around you. And of course, increasingly nowadays, it's important to understand the types of devices accessing yours. Because if you access a website from a phone, from a cellular provider, or alternatively, you access it from a desktop machine here, you're going to get very different qualities of service and have different requirements for your deployment. So, what if we had to answer these questions, but we had no data to do so? So what we usually do is we kind of lick our finger and feel the wind and get a general idea, which sometimes works, but more often than not, results in suboptimal deployment. So the one thing I want to get across in this presentation is that what we need is data, open shared data, and hopefully this makes sense to at least some Star Trek fans out there. But we already have, to an extent, open shared data. We have lots of platforms that generate data and share data freely. But often what we don't have is open shared analysis to accompany it. So if you want to go away and download an open data set, often you have to find yourself writing entirely new scripts to analyze it somehow. Well, this is often a waste of time because somebody else has done it before. So what we want to do in this project is integrate these two concepts so that instead of having to find your own data, write your own scripts. Instead, you can just click a couple of buttons and have it done for you automatically. And at this point, I want to introduce AMO. So AMO is a project that we're trying to bootstrap amongst these partners such as AFRINIC, such as the University of Cape Town and Cambridge and ISOC, and in fact many others. So it stands for the African Internet Measurement Observatory. And the idea is to create a logically centralized place where we can all generate data, we can all share data, we can all analyze internet data as a community. So we never have to repeat efforts. Instead, we can just play off each other's work collectively. So this is a system that we're trying to prototype at the moment, and I emphasize prototype because this is in the very early stages. So the main reason I'm here is to kind of get your ideas and feedback, not tell you about a fully implemented working model. So in this thing called AMO, we have essentially 4 system components that we're developing. The first one is what we call AMO apps. So these AMO apps are supposed to be very easy to use, self-contained modules, and they'll be available to you guys via a very straightforward web interface. And each one of these AMO apps is designed to answer a particular stakeholder-driven question, such as the one I asked before about where we should put our web servers. And behind the scenes, these apps contain all the logic and all the programming to orchestrate data collection and data analysis and data visualization. So instead of having to do these things ourselves, the apps can do it for us. The second component is what we call AMO pods. So AMO pods are essentially little boxes that can generate data to feed into the system. Now that data might be coming from active measurements, so they might be launching things like trace routes or pings or whatever. But they also come from third-party data sources who can contribute data and put them together in one big pot so it can be fused together and used. The third thing is then what we call a measurement manager. So this is a component that schedules all this data collection. And again, scheduling and managing measurements is a really tough problem. So having one inbuilt tool that does it all for us, we think would be quite advantageous. And the last part is what we call an analytics framework. So this is the thing that sucks in all the raw measurement data and then converts it into some reasonable form that can be then helpful to us guys. So these are the 4 system components, but I'm guessing that a lot of this sounds quite abstract. So what I wanted to briefly run through before letting you all go for lunch is a quick example of how this would work in practice. So this little guy on the left here is our web administrator. He's a chap who wants to deploy his web infrastructure somewhere in Africa. So he's asking, where on earth should I put my web servers? So instead of the traditional approach of either guessing or getting kind of community gossip, instead he's going to use this platform that we're building called AMO. And the AMO web interface will have basically lots of buttons, each one of them allowing this web operator to ask a specific question that he needs answering. So what he does is he selects which app he wants to use and double clicks on it. And what then happens is in the AMO infrastructure, which is essentially a big cloud platform, some code starts running. This app code starts running. Now this app is essentially responsible for answering that question. Where should I put my web server? So the first thing it does is it checks the existing data available in the system. Because if we already have the necessary data to answer the question, well, there's no point collecting more. But that'd be kind of boring, so let's for the moment pretend that we don't have the right data. So in that case, we need to collect more data. So at this point, we start using this component called the measurement manager. And the responsibility of this software is to go away, find data, and collect it in on behalf of the user. So at the moment, we're thinking of placing these things called pods scattered around the continent. And these pods are basically little boxes which can generate new data that might be launching active measurements or might be collecting passive measurements. So the measurement manager will select which ones to collect data from and then trigger those measurements, whatever they might be. And if you look inside one of these boxes, what you'll actually find is a little Raspberry Pi. So these are very low-cost commodity hardware that allows you to essentially run Linux on. And we're also Dockerizing our measurements, which are basically Linux containers, to allow us to ship out measurements to wherever we want. And these measurements could be really whatever you need, whatever you think of. So it's not restricted to anything. You could basically just run code. So linking back into the IETF discussion earlier, if you wanted to pilot new IETF protocols before standardization, this can allow that to happen. Okay, so once these data have been generated and collected, it goes back into our cloud in the center and it gets stored. And remember, it gets stored with essentially lots of raw data, data that's kind of hard to look at, hard to parse. So as I said before, we then have this analytics framework which takes the data and it then processes it and it converts it into a more meaningful format. And the idea is to have a community effort where anybody can generate the code to translate raw data into more meaningful forms. So for example, it might be topology data from the internet. So you might want to do things like centrality calculations to understand the central nodes in the topology. Whatever you can think of could be instantiated here as one of these analytics modules. And of course, once it's finished analyzing the data, it pops it back into the data store. And then this AMO app that we said at the beginning, the little red box, has the data it needs and then can visualize that answer back to the original user. So the idea is to have lots and lots of these little apps which are all useful for different stakeholders. So at this point, I have a few points to emphasize. So the first one is that this is a community effort. Essentially, AMO is supposed to just be a platform. So anybody can develop these apps, anybody can develop these plugins. So we're trying to develop it in a modular way so people can do their own code and throw it in and share it. The other thing is that anybody can inject new data into AMO. And basically, when you're using that data, it's up to you to decide which data sources you trust and which you don't trust. Again, this is meant to be kind of a community effort where people share the data they have. And of course, anybody can offer themselves as data points or places to put these measurement probes. Another thing that I wanted to emphasize is that, I'm sure as already of you aware, there are a number of measurement platforms in Africa already. And these are actually doing a pretty good job. So if you look at things like RIPE Atlas, it's got a fantastic footprint across the continent. You also look at things like MLab and ARC, which have different functionalities, different features, but are still very powerful. Please do not misinterpret this presentation. We're not trying to replace any of these technologies. If anything, we want to work alongside them. What we actually want to do is kind of augment them somehow. So all of these are generating data. So we want to bring that data together and we want to augment it with this process of analysis. So instead of having to collect separate data sets and then write your own scripts, the analysis can be integrated and done automatically. So our tagline is that AMO is a live support system. So it's a live support system for all these data science efforts. So to give you a quick update on the current status, we already have received some funding from one of the UK research councils to develop these technologies. So we have basically somebody working for just under a year on actually building these tools. And at the moment, if you look at the bottom, you'll see the kind of commodity technologies we're using. We're trying to use open source software and simple hardware like Pies to get this up and running. We've also applied for some larger funding also from the UK Council to fund 3 years of this effort. So hopefully I'm going to be coming back in 6 months' time like dancing and telling you, yes, we've got some more money to support this effort further. And incidentally, I thought I'd just put the link to this effort because I think it's very applicable to many people in this room. So if you are looking for support for funding research in the region, this is actually quite a good option. And of course, we're always looking for partners as well. So why am I telling you this? Well, as I said at the beginning, this is a very early stage project. We're just bootstrapping it at the moment. So there's myself and there's Amrish at the back there who are kind of actively pursuing this. So we're kind of looking for feedback. So if at any point you have some ideas, be them positive or negative, please feel to come and grab us. We're also looking for interest to gauge whether or not you guys think this is a valuable effort or just another research project. And of course, we're looking for partners and inputs. So if you guys are interested in contributing somehow to this or getting involved, please come and grab me because that would be fantastic. Anyway, I've delayed your lunch for long enough. Thank you very much for listening and thank you very much for AFRINIC for hosting this. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Khaled Khoba again, and again I will be speaking on my personal capacity. I'm so happy to see this project because I mean, at some moment of my life, I was involved with the AMLab deployment in Africa. The only comment I have is to make sure that when you talk about data with non-technical people, to ensure that there is no personal identifiable information. It's very important to the rest of the world to understand that is a natural data that has no information about anyone, and that the reason is scientific way of measuring the internet. So I think it's just to make sure that you this way of explaining things to the non-technical people is let them understand that the privacy is okay and all this protection is okay.
Cool. That's a fantastic point. And I just add something we didn't mention is that one of our main aims is to try and build these models of data protection directly into the architecture. So anybody contributing data, anybody sharing data will have basically free control over where it goes, who can use it, and actually even where it can be stored. So if for whatever reason you don't want it leaving the country or even your organization, it doesn't have to do so. So the architecture and the analysis is very much federated. And yes, data protection, data controls are very high on the agenda. But thank you for the comment.
Hi, this is Mark Elkins. Just an interest's sake, Gareth actually goes to Queen Mary College, and that's where I went. Anyway, I want to pull some loose ideas together. Pierre was very, very nice. He didn't also mention that they are doing a DNS or domain name server project, of which I'm one of the body or people collecting data for that. And then Wafa mentioned and moaned about that local CCTLDs in Africa are not, well, they're being stymied by governments in some sense on the selling of local domain names. And in the project, one of the most interesting things that I've discovered so far is if a person, an African person, buys a non-African CCTLD versus he is likely to host it overseas. And if he buys a local African CCTLD, he is twice as likely to host it in Africa, which was one of your other little points there. I just found that very interesting and pulling all these threads together.
And I would add that we're also very proud of all our Queen Mary alumni.
Yeah, my name is Mukam, speaking in my own capacity. I think that's a very great initiative. And I work for AFRINIC, and one of the things we do is we travel around, we build capacity. And I believe strongly that whatever you measure, you can improve. But I also believe that research must serve the purpose, the community for which it's being targeted. So what I would love to see is things like, let's do bird of a feather sessions so that we can have some kind of a minimum viable product online that people can begin to test, so that once you put in those resources to develop deep research, you know for sure that you are solving a real problem that people can use in 5 months' time, rather than just go down to some research. Oh, thank you very much, and congrats.
Thank you. And just quickly add it, once we have a prototype working, that's exactly what I think would be the right way to follow. So as I said in the presentation, the idea is to have like a community effort. So really, the community needs to understand this, know how to use it and see value in it, otherwise it will just collapse. So having things like bird of a feather sessions would be perfect for this. Thank you. Okay, I'm assuming that signals lunchtime. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so we are a little bit ahead of the agenda. We'll just break for lunch and we'll be back at, well, 10 minutes before 2 maybe, so that we can start a little bit earlier. So please tweet, put on Facebook, share, use the hashtag AFRINIC-25. We have also the opening cocktail tonight. It will be at the Sofitel as from 7. You will have shuttles going to your hotel and back if you need. We'll start the session at 2 with the critical information infrastructure from Kaling Uswani from Mauritius. So bon appétit.